Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be discussing Defenseless Creature, a play by Neil Simon. Now, the play is set in a bank. It discusses, the unempathetic bureaucracy and how the societal structures force the polytrade to defend themselves who are vulnerable. If we discuss the setting in detail, we see that the band that we mentioned earlier is likely to be placed in Russia. The main characters include Mrs. Suchkin, a persistent woman, and she demands money which she believes that the bank owes to her husband. Now we have Mr. Krusnov, who is a bank employee and who's very ill, and he is overwhelmed by Mrs. Suchkin's unreasonable demands. We also have another character, Pyotr Alexandrovich, a colleague who tries to assist Mr. Krusnov. Now let's move on to the plot overview. Now we see that Mrs. Suchkin arrives at the back. Now, see, she represents the lower class, maybe the proletariat, and this leads to a series of escalating encounters. Now, despite the repeated explanations from Kristinov, she insists on being paid. Each interaction increases the tension and frustration for Kristinov, and here Neil Simon highlights the absurd nature of bureaucracy through these exchanges or other conversations and persistence that Mrs. Suchkin imposes on Mr. Kristinov. Now, the major themes that is discussed in this play are: there is miscommunication and misunderstanding. Miscommunication in the sense that Mrs. Suchkin had already gone to 5 different government offices wherein she had been rejected the claims of the payment, and her last resort is the bank, and she misunderstands that the bank will be able to pay her off while the bank has no role in the said transaction. So there is also focus on the absurdity of dealing with unreasonable individuals who don't understand the societal setup or the state apparatus for that matter. So it is pretty difficult to convince them that they are in the wrong place and they are talking to the wrong individuals. We also see power dynamics where, though Kristinov is a bank employee and he should be the powerful one in this play, we see that the very seemingly powerless Mrs. Suchkin exerts influence with sheer persistence. So finally, she gets off the bank with the money she's owed plus a little more for her traveling expenses. And she decides to even come back for a letter of recommendation for her husband for future job. So this is sheer persistence that she achieves all this. At the beginning, we see a very powerless, lower class, proletariat, working class lady, but towards the end, we see that her powerful nature, she actually dominates the bank employees as well. Now, bureaucracy, absurdity, and social critique are the main focus of Defenseless Creature. Neil Simon satirizes the bureaucratic indifference and how a rigid system often fails to offer proper support and this results in absurdity or say Kafkainian scenarios. Now, we also see, as discussed earlier, Mrs. Sushkin's persistent demands reveal the frustrations of lower class within societal power and thereby critiquing social hierarchy and social tensions. We also see power dynamics as discussed earlier. So the iconic title highlights Sushkin's psychological dominance and how exploiting the societal expectation of vulnerability, challenging the norms of strength and helplessness. So the power shifts from her and she confronts Kristinov, reflecting a subversion of authority and the individual resistance within the institutional confines. The play also sees limits of empathy in professional roles. Now, Kristinov's compassion fatigue underscores the emotional cost of bureaucratic empathy, showing how compassion often conflicts with institutional duty. Neil Simon critiques the unsustainable expectations placed on individuals who balance professional roles with personal empathy within impersonal systems. Now, to conclude this, we should see that Neil Simon's story, that is put into play, illustrates the complexities of human interaction within various bureaucratic systems. Humor emerges from absurdity of the situation, emphasizing how individuals can navigate power dynamics despite seeming vulnerability. The point to be noted is how a lesser vulnerable person like Mrs. Suchkin overpowers the bank employee, Mr. Kristanov.